Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, to whatever this is. Today we're exploring a fascinating intersection between three distinctive disciplines. First, we have the epic poetry of the Bronze Age, that mixed in with the lyrical humanism of modern fiction. And then thirdly, we have the structure of alternative rock music. When we think of myths, we often think of them as like statues, cold and distant. But the story of Achilles has always been so much more than that, like a living thing. Recently, this narrative has kind of exploded. Like, this has been driven by two masterpieces, right? You have the 2011 masterpiece, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, and the 2017 song Achilles Come Down by this Australian band called Gang of Youths. While one is a novel, like a piece of literature, and the other is a 7-minute musical monologue, basically, they do share one specific goal, or they have one effect, and that is the humanization of a demigod, or Achilles. And that's kind of what I really wanted to talk about today, like what Madeline Miller really did with Achilles in her book, and also what the Gang of Youths did, like in terms of music theory, and with Achilles in that song. And I don't know if I just wanted to see that intersection, really. Okay, before we get to the song, let's start with the literary foundation, right, with what Madeline Miller did. So in the traditional Homer-esque style, the narrator is like detached from the currents going on, and it's like a semi-divine being, right, who's observing what's going on. Here, what Miller did is she gave basically the microphone to Patroclus. In the Iliad, Patroclus is a narrative catalyst, a device that gets Achilles to get back into the fight. Through Miller, he becomes a fully realized protagonist. He's like a warrior, but of the hearts, defined by his empathy rather than his physical prowess. The shift from the third person what to the first person why allows us to see Achilles not as like an invincible OP machine, but actually as a young man who's seduced by the promise of glory, yet frightened by the prospect of being forgotten. Basically, Miller's Achilles is a study in the duality of a divine being, of a demigod. Achilles was born to Thetis, right? A cruel and distant sea nymph who sees humanity as a contamination. His life is governed by the fact that there's a divine promise, right? That says, basically his destiny, that says that he will be one of the greatest, but he will also die very young. And the biggest thing about this story actually is the romanticization between Achilles and Patroclus, and I'm kind of explicit about it. Miller draws on a tradition that reaches all the way back to Plato's The Symposium and Aeschylus's The Myrmidon to reaffirm that these two were more than just friends. By centering their love, she reaffirms the contrast between two different types of heroism. You have the heroism of military glory, and you have the heroism of compassion. Okay, now let's look at how Dave Lepep from Gang of Youths translates this into a sound, like how he translates not the book but the myth of Achilles into a song. So from a musical perspective, Song of Achilles is not rock per se, but more like an opera-esque monologue. Philip Lepep himself said that the song was based on a Philip Glass style string quartet mixed with a pirate shanty. This creates that 6/8 gallop that's kind of similar to a racing and repetitive thoughts of a mind in crisis. The song also uses vocal layering to mimic an internal battle. So we have two primary voices. The first is the protective narrator, and this is from Dave himself. He uses his like a clear baritone, like compassionate voice, and it pleads for solidarity. Then we have the inner saboteur, right, which is like a distorted, altered voice that mimics like the intrusive thoughts of self-loathing. And in the song, basically, the saboteur, he mocks Achilles for his self-referential nature and the imposter syndrome that he's feeling, and basically says that resistance is futile, whilst the protective narrator tries to plead with him to, literally get off the roof. The musicology, the music on the background, it also represents this internal psychological turmoil that's going on, right? So the cello, it provides a steady, repetitive pattern and creates like an anxious stability, right? Meanwhile, the violin is unpredictable. It soars and plucks in pizzicato, and it represents the chaotic emotional spikes of suicidal ideation. And when these voices, they overlap in a bridge, it creates a musical representation of mental collapse. To be honest, for me, it's not just a song about the myth, right? It's like almost a musical representation of the experience of the push and pull of the will to survive. To add, now, besides the music, to add an even intellectual layer on top of the music, because of course we are intellectuals here. The Gang of Youths, they sampled and added bits and pieces of a 2001 recording of Albert Camus' essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, and it was recorded by Jacques Pradel. Now, the choice of Camus here is precise. Camus' philosophy of absurdism begins with one question. Given that life is inherently absurd, right, and it has no objective meaning, why should one just not kill themselves, like, immediately? In the song, you have this one sentence, and forgive my French, it goes like, "De souvenir d'une patrie perdue se divorce entre l'homme de sa vie," right? This highlights the disconnect between the sufferer and the world around them. The song adopts the rooftop that Achilles is on as a modern surrogate for the walls of Troy. Just as Achilles in his epic met a fated end, the modern Achilles in the song faces a perceived end to his meaning. But the song acknowledges Camus' conclusion. Basically, one must acknowledge and accept the absurdism of life, but should choose to live anyways, in defiance of it. Like, in the song, you have specifically narrator, the protective narrator, commands Achilles to see life as a means to a triumph. It's a direct application of the absurdist hero journey, right? Just is to live life anyways, even regardless how ridiculous and absurd and meaningless it may be. You also have the lyric, "The self is not so weightless, more whole and unbroken." This serves as an antidote to the nihilistic feeling that a single life doesn't matter. It ties the individual back to humanity through the interdependence of human relationships. Okay, so why did a 2011 novel and a 2017 song become rather popular in recent times? The answer kind of lies in the dark academia subculture and the digital community of book talk. Achilles Come Down basically became a viral anthem for what has been called the burnt out gifted kid phenomenon. This is a demographic, a specific group of people, young people, who feel paralyzed by the immense pressure of their own potential. Like, just like how Achilles is, like, he has the divine promise, you know, he has such huge potential. The roof in the song represents the academic and social expectations that everyone has of these kids, and they have the feeling that they might fail. Miller's success also sparked a mythic revival, right? People started reading, or people started retelling stories like Madeline Miller's A Thousand Ships or Japanese Saint's Ariadne. Return to these ancient myths to process our modern anxieties regarding identity and power, because these mythic archetypes are elastic enough to absorb our contemporary cultural exhaustion. In both the book and the song, we found the same message, that the rage of Achilles isn't a heroic virtue to be praised. It leads to a downward spiral that into grief that nearly destroys the soul, you know, one's self. True heroism is found in Patroclus's compassion and in the listener's choice to get up off the roof. Madeline Miller concludes her story with a heart-wrenching yet beautiful reunion in the afterlife. Here where Thetis finally acknowledges Patroclus, and he does this by marking his name on their tombstone. The Gang of Youth's song mimics a similar note of defiant hope. The song structure reminds me of a semicolon. It's not the end, it's a pause. It finishes with the command to everyone to throw yourself into the unknown and see life as a victory of endurance. Through proses or through songs, these stories prove that the value of Homer, of the epics of Homer, they still possess a value that exists outside of any culture, economic system, age. They help us rediscover our own capacity for meaning. So, next time you hear a beautiful cello or read about a golden boy from Pythia, remember, the story of Achilles isn't about how he died. It's about how he lived, how he loved, and how he grieved, and why you and me, even 3,000 years later, are still asking him to come down.